Welcome to the Yellowjackets Hive TV Buzz Edition. I'm Media Melanie here with,
And I'm Emily.
and we are back to cover From Season 3, Episode 4. And Emily, things are starting to get a little bit crazy out there in Fromville.
This is my favorite episode so far.
Favorite, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, okay. I like it. The big part of this episode was Tabitha obviously returning to Fromville and then all of the shit that went down there when she did. Wow.
It was intense. It was very action packed. And it went by really fast, I felt like.
It sure did. And this one is called There and Back Again. Boyd is forced to make a tough decision when newcomers arrive in town at nightfall. Victor unearths memories from the past in hopes of finding answers. First of all, I feel like this confirms for anybody who was wondering, was Camden, Maine the real world? It has to have been the real world if she's back again. Or still, are we thinking it's another level of this insane game? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it was the real world. I don't know. I just have like a feeling. And after their interaction and after seeing episode 4, it like really convinced me that it was the real world.
I would agree with that. Something that really struck me right at the beginning of this episode was Ethan was looking through some of Victor's drawings. And I don't know if you caught this or not, but one of them was 3 people, which I would assume are him, Eloise, and his mom. And then off to the side, there's another person, like a guy in black or whatever. And I'm just wondering, is that Victor's dad? And is he only over to the side because they're no longer with him? But why would he put them all in black? Is that indicating somehow Victor's dad is a bad guy? I don't know, but I just happened to notice that and thought, oh, that's kind of strange.
I don't get bad vibes from him, from the dad. Do you?
No, not necessarily. I do think, given the time I spend in the Facebook group, I've definitely seen some theories about him being the big ringmaster of all of this. And I don't personally get bad vibes from him, but he did have a little bit of a temper. But at the same time, you know what? The guy's been through a lot. He lost his entire family. Of course, he's probably not going to be the most balanced human being out there, right?
Yeah, and he felt like his chance at finding his son after all that time was like slipping through his fingers. So he wanted to avoid that. Like he didn't want that to happen. So he did what he thought was the smartest thing to do, which was to drive. And obviously that was not smart because they ended up in a car crash.
With that, back to like Victor's drawing for one quick second. Another thing he said during this episode was when he was talking about to Sara how he had to gather all these items from everybody to bury them since he couldn't bury the bodies. First of all, how did the bodies end up getting buried? Did they just rot there and he ended up burying their remains later or wait until someone else came to town to help him? That confused me a little bit.
That's true.
I mean, but he also says he's talking about the night everybody died. His mom went to save the children. And then he says when he's talking about his mom and Eloise, they died. So he did lump in Eloise saying she died along with his mom, but we still don't have confirmation that we've ever seen her body. But he did say they died. So I'm just wondering, did he make the assumption she died? Or maybe she's not dead, although we did not see her in Camden. So I'm still a little unsettled about the whole Eloise situation.
I mean, even if he didn't physically see her body, I'm assuming he just lumped her in with that group, given how many people he did see dead. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So he would just assume that she died as well, because why would a 9-10-year-old girl be able to escape that massacre on her own?
Right. That's a really good point. That is a very good point. We hear from Thomas again in this episode too, Emily, which is another really crazy thing that's happening out there. We know there are no actual phone lines, and we know Thomas has talked to Jim, and he called him Daddy in the first episode, but this time he called him Jim, which I thought was really weird. And I was getting the vibe he's a bad monster. Why don't you read to us exactly what Thomas said to Ethan on the phone this time?
Okay. Ethan, it's Thomas. Mom's in trouble. She's in an ambulance. And Ethan says, what ambulance? And Thomas says, "You'll see. She's on her way. You have to help her. You can't be afraid." And Ethan says, "Who is this?" And Thomas says, "I told you, it's Thomas." And Ethan says, "Who is this really?" So even Ethan knows that, like, there's no possible way for that to be Thomas. I mean, Thomas was a baby when he died. So whoever's on the phone is obviously not Thomas. But who the fuck is it?
Who the fuck is it? I keep thinking, is it the boy in white? Is it one of these monsters? But the really alarming part about this whole conversation is when Jim picks up the phone and Thomas says, Jim says, "Leave my children alone." And he says, "But they're not your children anymore." What does that mean? Are they the town's children? Were they never his children in the first place? What do you make of this, Emily?
Honestly, I have no idea at this point. Maybe it's to hint that, like, they all belong to this town now. Like, they are trapped there. That is their fate, you know what I mean? And but other than that, like, at this point, I genuinely don't know. Like, I have no guess. I
I
really
don't know
don't.
either. You say fate, and the theme song, of course, ties into that. Que sera, sera, whatever will
Mhm.
be, will be. So, is this a fatalist situation where they were all just meant to be there? And like you said, now they all belong to the town. I mean, it's possible. It's possible. And
Yeah.
I think it's really fascinating, the whole ambulance situation, right? They come back
Yeah.
to the town, and of course, Tabitha sees what's happening and is losing her mind in the ambulance. And they're all like,
Mhm.
"What's up with this crazy lady here?" And I mean, no offense, if I was on that ambulance, I would think she was crazy too, because there are no rational thoughts that
Yeah.
explain any of this. And
Yeah. And especially because the cop already pointed out that they already knew who she was because she was like, "Oh, you're the lady with the lunchbox." So she probably already thinks that she's crazy carrying around a lunchbox as a grown adult.
yeah,
And then she starts freaking out saying like, "No, no, like we need to you need to go towards the town. You need to go towards the town." And they're like, "Lady, we're not going towards the town. Like we're going back to the highway. Like we're going home." But
yes. Ooh,
obviously they did not go home.
they did not. They get to the town, and one of these asshole monsters is, of course, lying in the middle of the road, laying a trap for them. And, meanwhile, we know Boyd and Randall, they are over in the bus, kind of watching for the monsters. And Randall's like, "Hey, something's not right here." And Randall was spot on. He knows their routine and he knows
Yep.
something is going on. And indeed, it was. So shit goes down with the ambulance crew. And we see a
I
couple of,
kind of had the same thought before Randall said that out loud that something was up because, like he said, and what we've seen so far, they really do seem like creatures of habit. And like he said, the one monster would go up to the bus every single night and just hum in front of him. And like they weren't doing that. So I think that they almost know when somebody is going to enter the town and they like prepare for it, if you know what I mean.
Ugh, and of course, the ambulance gets there at night, but it's interesting because
Mhm.
they first encounter the tree when it's daytime, so night escalates pretty fast. I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
we're suspending some disbelief, but either way, they arrive at nighttime and the monster attacks. And wow, really good picture of the monster there.
Mhm.
I mean, could you get any creepier? Seriously.
Yeah. They look different than they did when the show first started, I think. Looking back on like season 1, when they first show them attacking people, I think they've changed the way that they look a little bit since then.
Oh, interesting. I didn't really notice that. And I wonder if that's because the monsters themselves are changing or if they've just
Yeah.
changed the aesthetic of the show. As Victor said, everything is changing. So if everything's changing, maybe it makes sense that the monsters, are also changing. So
Yeah.
we'll
That could
see.
be.
But, poor Tabitha, she's like handcuffed inside of the ambulance and can't get out. And then the paramedic woman is just kind of like trying to do her best with this insane situation and luckily runs away before she gets killed by the monsters. And Tabitha, is trying to get Victor's dad to wake up. Jim
Yeah.
realizes, hey, there's an ambulance here. Ethan said there's going to be an ambulance. And what's interesting about that is the boy in white was, or Thomas was trying to kind of like warn him, right? So
Kind
is
of.
does Thomas have a good intention if he's trying to say you need to save her? Or was all of this part of the elaborate trap to get them out to the ambulance in hopes that the monsters would kill them all?
I think that's more likely, just based on the things that this entity has said to them on the phone and the intent behind what they're saying, it seems like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't know who it is, but I don't get good vibes from whoever this is. So,
No, given, the voice on the tower that was kind of warning them, the voice now on the telephone, I've got to think there's something nefarious behind it. And one of
yeah.
the big defining moments of this episode, and I mean, there were a couple, was the ambulance door opening and Jim seeing that Tabitha is in there, handcuffed with an unknown man who, of course, we know is Victor's dad. And everybody's scrambling. Um, you know, shit's just going down. And Boyd and Randall obviously try to get the toolkit out of the bus, try to save Tabitha, but it doesn't work out that way.
No. And I was really surprised that Randall actually stepped up and was like, I have a toolkit in the bus. Like, let me go grab it. Like, he really, I mean, he's still an asshole, but he wanted to help. And it genuinely seemed like he wanted to do the right thing and help them in a bad situation.
I mean, he said that to Boyd, if there's
Yeah.
any chance we're getting home, I really want to be here to help. And the poor guy is still suffering from cicada syndrome, I guess we can call it, and very clearly traumatized by what happened. And Boyd doesn't really take that very seriously, or I think give enough credence to what he's been through, because Boyd's been through a lot too. I feel like he should maybe be a little more empathetic towards Randall. But,
I agree.
either way, at least Randall's on maybe this redemption arc, kind
I
of,
think so.
because
It looks like it's starting to appear that way, anyways.
it definitely does. And Randall kind of takes one for the team because, Boyd's trying to get out of there. The monster holds up the keys and taunts him and says, "Look at these, take them. We get to keep Randall, though you can't save them all." And Boyd's just like, "Fuck, man, this
Yeah.
town, what are you guys doing to me?" So he's kind of like, "Fuck you," drives away and leaves Randall there.
And Randall had the talisman in his hand too, like right before this happened. And he holds it up and he's like, get the fuck back. And one of the monsters is like, oh, sweetie, it doesn't work that way. So just holding it obviously doesn't protect them from the monsters. We know that.
Yep, they have to be in the enclosed space. And we get another little Ethan and Julie moment as well. Ethan says, "Ever since you fell asleep and your eyes got all white, you've been different. Are you sure you're okay?" And between her and Randall, they're both still very much being affected by this whole cicada
Oh,
incident.
yeah.
And Ethan acts like such an adult sometimes, trying to help his sister. And he's in more of a parent role at times, I feel like, than Jim and Tabitha are.
I feel like Julie and Ethan parent each other.
They do. They need each other. They almost
Yeah.
only have each other to rely on because Jim and Tabitha have definitely been kind of doing their own thing, which I get it. This is a situation that no parent wants to be in, and they're doing their best. Their best might not be the right thing, but they're trying. They love their
Yeah.
kids. And unfortunately, the love for their kids doesn't always translate into a plan that's going to work or help.
No,
So,
no. And especially in an environment like this where it's kind of do or die at all times. Like,
oh,
you
it
don't
is
have room for error, you know what I mean?
very do or die. And speaking of die, shit goes down at Colony House. The cop runs up there and is obviously trying to shoot at the monsters. We know guns don't work against them. And she accidentally shoots Nikki inside the window, which,
Mhm.
I mean, it was an accident. She's trying. She doesn't know where she is.
Yeah.
It's just a bad situation overall.
How did you feel about the way that Boyd reacted to that? Like, the way that he freaked out on her and screamed at her for the fact that she did that? Like, I mean, I think he was just upset that somebody got hurt, but at the same time, like, I felt like he attacked her and it was, like, kind of unfair. Like, she's in a new environment. Like she's in the same boat that you were all in when you first got there. She's terrified. She has these things running at her that are not dying when she's shooting them. So, you know what I mean? Like him going at her like that, I was like, come on, man, like cut her some slack.
I felt the same exact way. I thought it was unwarranted because, again, she doesn't know what she's dealing with. She's trying her best to defend herself and
Mhm.
run into the house and say, hey, there's these things out there. She's not trying to intentionally harm anybody. She is a cop. She has a badge. She has a gun. She's trying to do her job. And very clearly, this place makes it difficult to do that job. But
Yeah.
also, she just doesn't know yet exactly what's in store for her. And I agree that Boyd definitely overreacted. But again, these emotions in Boyd are really bubbling up because this town, as we keep saying when we talk to Harold, as he said directly, the town is fucking with him. It is a bully and it is just
Yeah.
escalating more and more, even more now that he was basically forced to leave Randall. And look where he ended up at the end of the episode. He was not
Mm.
in good shape. And can we talk about the graphicness of that throat wound? Yikes.
Why do you think they didn't kill him? Like they made that the monster even said like we get to keep Randall. So I assumed they were going to kill him.
I thought so too. I mean, he is still alive at the end of this episode. We will see exactly what happens in episode 5, but his neck was not looking very good. And I think that was the monster's way of fucking with Boyd even further and then putting their efforts on display for everybody at Colony House who's dealing with a pretty shitty situation because Mariel's there asking for alcohol and pliers and tweezers to try to get this bullet out. And I mean, there's a lot of blood going on. It's not
Yeah.
looking good right now.
I was really surprised that she managed to get the bullet intact, like out completely intact from her stomach with
How can
the
you do that without a scope? I was more wondering that too. She's just kind of reaching inside, feeling for metal. We know, obviously, at
Oh,
the end, Nikki dies. And I'm wondering, did Muriel accidentally puncture an organ that led to the
that's what
internal
I
bleeding?
thought.
That's what I thought too, because she's kind of just digging around in there. I don't know
Yeah.
without a scope how you can feel for bullets. I mean, I guess they do it on TV shows all the time, but I don't know.
But she's not a doctor. She's a pediatric nurse. So
Yeah.
for her to do that anyways, I feel like is probably outside of her skill set.
Right. And I mean, meanwhile, Christy is out in the settlement still. So she's not available to
Mhm.
help. She's, of course, with Kenny. She's with Jade. Christy has, a late night talk with Kenny after they get back from freeing the leg. And Kenny, poor Kenny, he's out there writing something for his mom, saying in Chinese culture, they write letters to the dead on special holidays, like even though it's not a holiday. But
I like that moment. I really like that moment between them because she like reminded him like you're not alone here. And their conversation was very endearing. And I love how Jade like woke up and was like, "Can't you guys talk about this in the morning?"
Kenny, I'm just so endeared towards Kenny, and I know it's wrong, but I keep hoping that him and Christy get back together. I mean, Marielle's
I
nice
do
enough, but
too.
I really want Kenny and Christy together. I just love them from the very beginning. And during this conversation, while they're out there, Jade shares a story about Tian Chen and how she connected with him over Christopher's journal regarding the symbol and whatnot. And I love how Kenny also told Jade that his mom really liked him and that she frowned at people that she liked and just ignored the ones she didn't. I thought that was like really cute.
Yeah, I like that too. I thought that was really funny because it probably was very true. Like she didn't seem like a woman that displayed a lot of emotion. So for her to frown at you, like that's something.
Some of the hallucinations he was experiencing with
Mhm.
that soldier out there, and also opens up a little bit about when he saw the man trapped by the boulder in the root cellar. And I'm wondering, how is that going to come back? All these hallucinations seem to be playing into one another and escalating a little bit. So it seems like, Jade is opening up more about it, but I'm wondering how they're going to pay off some of these hallucinations. Like, what is the end game for the stuff that he's seeing?
I think he also brought up the root cellar thing to Kenny to like persuade him like you know how long this has been going on, like this isn't news to you that like I've been having these hallucinations and visions. You were there when I had one, like you can attest to it kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, that is true. That is definitely true. And yeah, we'll see what happens with them out in the settlement once they end up returning. But really, the big focus of this episode was Colony House and all of the things that are going down there. And it's just not looking good. Donna has another kind of breakdown with Boyd and starts crying. And I mean, it's just a really bad night in Fromville.
And then we have Victor's story time with Sarah too.
We
That was
sure do.
that was interesting.
Very interesting. And I'm just curious, we've talked about this before, how Victor doesn't remember a lot of this stuff. We know it's trauma, of course, but there are some things that are very traumatic that he does remember. So, this selective trauma memory is interesting in the way in which he feels it can be triggered again. So, of course, he goes to Sara, who's the scariest person in town. And this is when he says something that's like, my mom went to save them, her and Eloise died. And he says something like, "Yeah, but I didn't murder them like you murdered your brother or something." This
Yeah.
casual little snipe he takes at her, I thought was kind of funny and good for Sara for just taking it. She's very self-aware of her
Yeah,
actions and what went down, and she's just really trying her best to help Victor with
she is.
whatever it is he's working through. So good for her. Talk about another redemption arc.
Yeah. I personally like Sarah's character. Like it doesn't forgive what she did, but I like her character. I think she adds a lot to the show.
Yep, I agree. And what was one of the quotes, Emily, that Victor said to Sara when they were together trying to build this fort and have him remember?
When I was a boy, my mother tried to save everyone, but she died, and everyone died. And I can't remember how, why, and I think I need to remember soon. And Sarah asks why. And and Victor says, "Too many things are changing. It's never snowed here before. We have to go in the basement. Up here's for daytime stories. The basement's for secrets." And he also like made a point to tell her that when they were kids, that him and his sister used to play hide and seek in a lot of the structures in the town, and the house that Sarah lived in, that happened to be like her favorite place to play. So like he had like a special tie to that house that Sarah lives in. So I think like being in the basement was like very significant for him.
Definitely. And I assume he thinks that will trigger something. Victor also talks a little more about the night his mother died. As we mentioned, he stayed until morning and I came out. There were bodies everywhere. That was the day I met the boy in white. You know, the boy in white? Yeah, he's my friend. He was my only friend all those years I was alone. Interesting, the first time he meets the boy in white is after this massacre of the townspeople. The boy in white looks very happy, and that concerns me.
Yeah.
Why does he look so happy? Obviously, he was played a part in sending Miranda to go try to get the kids saved, and she dies, right? And
Mhm.
why is he so happy all of the other people died? And we still don't have answers as to how all of these people died out in the middle of the night because they should have been inside hiding. Why were they all outside?
Yeah, that's true.
It just
And like you also said, I didn't really put much thought into it until you questioned it earlier. The boy in white told him to take trinkets from all of them because he couldn't physically bury all their bodies. So keep those things to remember them by. But if he didn't bury their bodies, where did their bodies go?
right. Did he wait for them to all fully decompose and then just drag piles of bones somewhere? Did he wait until other people got to the town and had help? How long did Victor go with just strolling through town with bodies and blood and guts just laying out there? It
And
seems alarming.
how long was he actually alone for too? Like after that happened, you know what I mean? Like before new residents showed up.
That is a really, really good question. And I feel very unsettled about Christopher's character as well.
Yeah.
Once Victor starts going into the trinkets, once him and Sara build the fort in the basement, he says, "Oh, this belongs to Mrs. Gerber. Oh, this
Mhm.
belongs to, whoever." But he finally puts two and two together and says, "There's nothing here for Christopher. I need to find Jasper," and starts remembering Jasper talking to Christopher, references
Yeah.
Christopher changing, getting angry or being scary. What was the fate of Christopher? I mean, are we sure Christopher even died?
Yeah.
Has he ever specifically mentioned Christopher dying? He's mentioned his mom dying. He inadvertently mentioned Eloise dying, though never confirmed he saw her body. What about Christopher?
I
Could
not
could
that I can
Christopher be the
remember.
man that was stuck down in
That
the root cellar?
mm, I thought you were gonna say, could Christopher be the one that he drew in the drawing with his family in the corner?
Oh, yeah. I mean, maybe that could be too. You know what? That's a really good point. But also, since we saw that context of Jade bringing up the person stuck in the root cellar again, who was that person and how long were they there? Why did nobody else see them?
Yeah.
I mean, if we're really thinking crazy thoughts, like, did Victor die down there and now he's a ghost apparition of himself in the town? Okay, I think that's a little too off the rails. That's too much, Melanie. Just stop. That is
I don't think
officially
Victor's a ghost.
okay. Yeah, I don't think so either. All I'm saying is that it seems like anything is possible in Fromville
That's
and
right.
all of these things. It's like they want to make connections in my brain, but the dots just can't quite connect.
And that's where Jade's at right now. Like, you know what I mean? Like he's trying to connect all the dots in Fromville and he's trying so hard and it feels like he has pieces, you know what I mean? But they're just not in the right order.
Back at Colony House, Nikki has died. Tilly and Elgin also have a conversation, which is kind of interesting. And I'm just thinking to myself still, like, Tilly, why would you even have done this reading with a poor woman who's eating rotten vegetables? Like, the black arts may not be the best place to go. And then the
Yeah.
bird thing happened, and Elgin is still seeing this thing that he's seeing wearing a kimono.
Yeah.
Like, what is actually happening? Elgin seems to be going on some sort of spiral. And speaking of spiraling, poor Tabitha must be like, what is actually going on? I'm back here. Jim is probably like, what is actually going on now with Tabitha? They say, she tells him, I met Victor's dad, etc. And he says, are you sure? And she's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's his dad. I went to his house. I just worry about the fallout when the townspeople who all looked at her like she was a ghost, essentially, when she returned,
Yeah.
how are they going to feel about her coming back and not having actually taken any action in the real world that would have led them to rescue?
I mean, she didn't ask to be back there. You
She
know what
did
I
not.
mean? Like
Yeah.
she ended up back there, or was it by chance? Or was it fate? Like when you like was she destined to be there forever? You know what I mean? I don't know. But so I get why they would be upset with her because they may feel like if she didn't do anything, like she wasted the opportunity, like out in the real world to tell people about this place. But if I were her, like I'd be afraid to tell people because I'd feel like people would just look at me like I was crazy and try to lock me up in a hospital.
Exactly. Even going back to the teenage girls who she wanted to use
Yeah.
their phone, I felt really bad for Tabitha, but at the same time, I can see why people would be questioning, who is this woman? Is she dangerous? Is she, does she need help? That sort of thing. Um, and now it's the same thing with the people in the ambulance. The paramedic now is probably realizing, hey, this woman knew what she was talking about, but
Yeah.
again, if we're in that situation, we're not going to believe what that person is saying about
No.
this town with monsters and it's dark at night. All that stuff is a little out there, obviously.
Yeah, you're not going to believe that until it happens to you.
You are definitely not going to. And the cop's in for kind of a rude awakening. She's in a new place. She's normally a person of authority, and it will be interesting to see how her authority in the real world translates into that or something else once
Yeah.
she settles into Fromville a little bit.
Speaking of spiraling, you know who else is spiraling? Fatima is spiraling.
Oh my gosh. So I'm so glad you brought that up because there are few things when I watch television that I actually have to turn my head away for. I rewatched this episode right before we recorded. I like to do that so everything's fresh in my mind. And it's morning time here in San Diego still. I'm drinking my coffee. When she put her fucking fingers inside the bloody wound and licked the blood, Emily, like, oh my God, I turned away. And this is the second time now I've watched this episode. And I actually said out loud to myself and my animals, oh my fucking God, that is disgusting. Like,
That's a
what?
far cry from eating rotten vegetables. Like jumping to sticking your finger in a bullet wound and licking the blood off of them, like human blood. That is like, ugh.
It did not gross me out quite as much when Mariel was digging the pliers into the wound, but it really grossed me out with her sticking her fingers in there. And I take some notes and I wrote vampires ? Because what other creatures, Emily, do we know that consume blood?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. And for people who think she's turning into a monster slowly, like if that's what's happening to her, like we don't know if the monsters even consume blood. So like if they don't consume blood, then why is she all of a sudden getting a taste for human blood out of nowhere?
That is very interesting. Even the dead carcasses of the victims that the monsters kill, they don't drag their bodies away and eat them. Yeah, their innards
No.
are gone. So we've never seen them directly eating the
No.
humans.
No.
We know that there's bile inside of them, and for there to be bile, they have to be consuming something,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we haven't seen them drinking blood. We've seen them covered in blood before, but vampires ? Possible? Maybe.
That thought did cross my mind too.
But that was one of like the yuckiest things,
Yeah.
I think, that was happening. And just again, what a bad night at Colony House. What is going on with Elgin, though? Just really quick back to the woman in the kimono asking for help. Who is she? Why is she asking for help? Why does she look so much like Fatima? I have questions.
I have so many questions.
So many questions. And at the end of the episode, well, we've already mentioned it, Randall is sprawled across the ambulance with its lights flashing, sitting in front of Colony House with his neck essentially a giant open wound. And it is disgusting. Is he going to be okay? Will he ever be able to talk again? Did this thing get his vocal cords? Maybe this will shut Randall up forever. I hope not, because again, he's on his redemption journey right now. So
I don't think that the people of the town would mind that too much, though.
I know, which is kind of too bad. And it's funny because at one point he mentions, you guys all get to be inside with the curtains and whatnot. He could probably put curtains up on the bus if he really wanted to. So in a way, I think he wants to be an active participant in this. I think he enjoys watching their nightly routines and seeing what they do. And he meant it when he said he wants to help if there's any chance of them getting out here, because he could have just stayed somewhere else, but he did choose to stay with Boyd. And that decision, of course, cost him very big.
I mean, I would want to help too if I was hallucinating cicadas attacking me when there are no bugs. Like that has to mess with your brain.
The whole cicada thing in general is just wild.
Yeah.
It came for 3, and you know what? It's still haunting Randall very clearly. And obviously Julie still hasn't recovered either. She's just at the point now where maybe she can even start trying to talk about it a little bit more, with Ethan prodding her, asking these questions if she's okay,
I think part of the problem is that they don't really even know what actually happened to them. Like, because it was so traumatizing and scary that like all they remember is fear.
And as he says to Boyd, he says something like, you weren't there, you didn't see what we saw. And I feel like we're going to end up getting more context into exactly what they did see. And
I hope so.
I wonder, is this a permanent thing? Is this cicada syndrome something that's going to be with them forever? Or is it something like the worms? Because, I mean, we had the worms in Boyd's blood. We haven't really seen any worm situations again, unless we're talking about, Boyd ended up transferring some of them to Elgin during the blood transfusion, and then perhaps Elgin slept with Fatima, and maybe the worms were part of this weird pregnancy situation, and that's how she got pregnant. But we haven't heard much about the worms again. Now we're on cicadas. So
Yeah.
how many
Creepy
more things
bugs
are there?
everywhere.
I mean, how many more things are there? We've got a settlement out in the woods with these creepy stick men and Jade seeing these crazy visions. We've got Victor building forts in basements, trying to remember things that have been blocked out of his mind. We've got shit going down at Colony House with poor Randall, new residents. What is going to happen when the residents talk to Tabitha? What is going to happen when Victor sees his fucking dad? Seriously.
Yeah.
The reunion of Victor and Henry is probably one of the most awaited moments now that we know that they make it back to Fromville.
Yeah, I would agree.
Oh my gosh, Emily. So, episode 5 will be obviously coming up next. We will be here to cover it and the rest of the series. And we've been dropping these as pre recorded videos because our schedules are tough. It's tough to plan going live on Sunday nights, but we are going to commit to going live for the finale no matter what. So that way we can all really wrap our heads around the final thoughts of this season. And it's coming up pretty fast. It's flying by. We're getting things happening in season 3, which is really nice that we're not just getting these episodes that are dragging along with no action and no answers. Because the worst thing as a viewer is feeling like, oh, that was too slow. I'm not getting the answers I want. But at least we're getting some forward movement. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. Like, this isn't just filler. This is like important stuff to the plot development.
Super important. And I am dying to see next week Victor and his dad seeing each other for the first time in 40-something years. Kind of dying to see what happens to Randall and to Christy and Jade and Kenny and everybody make it out of the woods and back okay. We've got some stuff that is continuing to unfold, and I'm sure episode 5 will continue on that path.
Yes, I don't think it'll disappoint.
No, definitely not.
So, until we spill again.